Joining us to, well, hopefully make some heads or tails of this is KTAR legal analyst Barry Markson. Barry, howdy. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
So, Barry, if I'm looking at the reaction, today's ruling is somewhere between the end of the republic as we know it or no big deal. Like, can you help me understand how big a ruling today's presidential immunity ruling was?
Well, it's certainly big in that, in the 250-year history of the United States, we've never had anybody say this before. No court of law has ever said the president has this level of immunity or any immunity like this. And frankly, we've never had a president accused criminally of committing crimes and being indicted. So there's a lot of firsts and a lot of history here. So it's huge in that respect. Will it, other than Trump, will it affect other presidents? The answer to that, I guess we'll find out. But again, it's never happened before. So I don't know that this is going to make that much of a practical difference once you get away from Trump. And we'll see how much of a difference it makes in the actual cases against Trump right now. There's just more work that has to be done based on what the Supreme Court did today. But I think that's why some people are saying it's not that big a deal. But it is a huge decision. It's historic in nature, and it does provide immunity for one person where now the Supreme Court has ruled that if you're the president of the United States and you commit crimes under certain guises, you cannot be criminally prosecuted. We've never had that before.
Now, again, we're talking to Barry Markson, KTAR legal analyst, in light of today's Supreme Court ruling. One of the things I noticed and that stood out in the decision was talking about an official conduct of the president and unofficial conduct of the president. What constitutes an official act and an unofficial act? Well, I was going to say, even looking at it, Barry, that seems open to interpretation. That's not an obvious yes, no, black, white answer, is it?
No, it'll be interpreted by the court. So basically what the Supreme Court did today was they created three different buckets for how you can interpret the immunity decision today. So the first is if a president is acting within his what they call his core activities, his core responsibilities. So I'll give you an example. Would be the pardon power. Pardon power is provided by the Constitution to the president. A president, according to the Supreme Court now, cannot be criminally charged for anything under using that pardon power because it's a core activity, core responsibility of the president, his duty. So that now you're not under this. You couldn't, for example, see a president indicted because he pardoned somebody. Now, what happens if the president takes a $2 million bribe to pardon somebody? Does that change it? Well, we'd have to find out. But according to this decision, that's kind of off the table, and there's full immunity there. The last part, the third part, is activities while the president is in office, but activities that are obviously done for his personal gain as opposed to the office. So let's say, for example, Trump wins again. He's in office, but he commits crimes or he's accused of committing crimes on behalf of his business. He steals money, something that has nothing to do with the presidency, just something he's doing while he is president. They're saying in those cases there's no immunity. So if it's a personal activity, there's no immunity. So the big middle area is what you just said, Bruce, is what is considered an official action as compared to an unofficial action.
Yeah.
And one example that was given by one of the justices, Amy Coney Barrett, who did a concurring opinion agreeing with the majority, she said, for example, that the fake electors, so that the scheme that we now know Trump did, along with a whole bunch of other people, the conspiracy to stay in office despite losing the election, Amy Coney Barrett wrote specifically that is something that if it were to come back to before her, she would not find that to be an official action. That would be a personal action. It was in her mind Trump doing something to stay in power. That's not acting as president. That's acting to benefit himself personally or as a candidate.
But the majority of justices didn't even agree with that.
That's true. She did that on her own. So you could still have a 5-4 decision on that. We don't know yet. I mean, that'll have to be decided.
So has anybody taken into account that although we just heard what President Biden said about this, does this mean Biden can do what he wants as long as it's considered an official act?
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, so under this interpretation, what is now the law, you could definitely have Biden doing things against other people. I mean, he can theoretically he could go out and pardon anybody he wants and not face any criminal indictments. He's definitely, the president is now, I don't even want to call him a king, but he's definitely been giving immunities that no one else has and no one in the history of the country has ever enjoyed before.
And it seems like when he's addressing this that he's not in agreement with it, right?
Biden, you mean?
Yes, Biden. Yeah.
Yeah, Biden is not in agreement with the Supreme Court here because he has said, and most people have said in the past, is the president shouldn't be held to a different standard like that. Why should somebody, just because they're elected president, be allowed to commit crimes without taking responsibility or being held accountable? And that's what this is. We're now saying that when in office, a president has the ability to commit crimes and not be held accountable for that or face any criminal responsibility for that. Now I can tell you, I can give you the argument on the other side of that is, and what the Supreme Court said is, we have to have a president who has the ability and feels safe to act boldly and swiftly and to do things that he feels he needs to do on behalf of the United States. So, for example, I don't think any of us would say a president who gives the green light to going out and having an activity, a military action against terrorists and
taking out Osama bin Laden, for example.
Yeah, but instead of killing bin Laden, we kill a whole bunch of civilians. It's a giant, giant mess, and everybody agrees.
Right.
There were times in Vietnam when things like that happened. And you don't want the president to be subject to criminal prosecution as a result of that. You may be upset with the president. It may be negligence. You may say that's irresponsible. We can't have that. But you can't have, I don't think most of us would say that we can't have a president who's afraid to act on behalf of the country because he's afraid that he may be personally put in prison afterwards as a result.
That's fair.
That's what the Supreme Court is trying to say. How that's interpreted by the courts and how they're interpreting it here could be an issue.
Barry, appreciate your insight into it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
That is KTAR legal analyst Barry Markson. So, again, if you look at it, the Supreme Court basically ruled in the sense of, we're going to send it back to the lower court with these new parameters you should run it through. But it seems like it leaves interpretation up to individual courts all over the country.
It just feels like the more I hear about these things, it gets more wishy-washy as we're trying to be like, but what exactly does this mean?
What can you or can't you do?
And then we're left all talking to each other about what this means, because even though they're making these rulings, it just seems unclear because things are left open to interpretation.
I don't
official,
think,
unofficial.
Right. Well, and I just don't think the Trump fans have fully grasped the idea that if it's okay for Trump to do it, it's okay for Biden to do it.
Yes,
if only Kamala Harris has the courage to do the right thing.
This goes both ways.
Yeah, will they be able to declare the election in your official capacity was completely wrong, and we're going to have to do it over again?
Yeah, I don't know.
And you can't hold me liable for it.
I sit and I watch things like this, and I'm like, okay, explain it to me plain, because what is really going on
This is
here?
a tough one to explain plain, Law. I'm not going to deny.
Thanks for watching Outspoken with Bruce and Gatos. Tap to watch more from KTAR News and click the button in the middle to subscribe.